Today's episode is brought to you by the Consultancy Growth Network. As you'll know, I'm a big believer in learning from people who've achieved the things that you want to. It's why I run this podcast, to share the stories of consulting leaders and how they've got to where they are today. So when I started talking to Mark Jansen and the team at Consultancy Growth Network, it was clear there was an obvious fit between Climate Consulting and their mission and what they are building with their network. But you're probably asking, what is the Consultancy Growth Network? The Consultancy Growth Network is the leading community of boutique consulting leaders. It brings together seasoned consulting growth experts who successfully scaled their own boutiques, with rapidly growing consulting founders looking to emulate their success. Now, you might be thinking, who are these growth experts? What do they actually know about consulting? And this is one of the most exciting things that personally I find about the network. The team at the Consultancy Growth Network have searched far and wide for some of the best boutique consulting leaders to help their members on their journeys, some of which I have previously interviewed for this podcast, such as Don Morehouse and Augusto Negrillo. But it's not just the insights from these people that you will benefit from. By joining, you get access to their jam-packed calendar of regular in-person and online events, their comprehensive growth hub of resources, and their active Slack community. Through all of these channels, you can learn, solve challenges, and achieve the goals you want for your firm. And now, if that wasn't enough reason to sign up, the Consultancy Growth Network is giving all listeners to this podcast a special sign-up offer. If you join for 12 months, you join for that next year, you will get your 13th month for free, giving you that extra month to continue to build on everything you're learning and continue to benefit from the network. To sign up, just visit consultancygrowthnetwork.com or contact their partnerships director, Luke at consultancygrowthnetwork.com. And when you're talking about joining, mention Create Engage or Climate Consulting, and you will get that special sign-up offer. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Climate Consulting. This one is an extra special one as it is a round two. And I know from speaking to many of you, you really enjoy these round twos to hear where people have got to. And this one is with friend, client, and obviously former podcast guest, James Constable. James is the CEO of Albany Beck. And it is crazy to think that the last interview we did is almost or over 3 years ago. I'd have to check which one. Right during the depths of the COVID lockdown. Obviously, a lot has changed in the world since then, and the same is true for Albany Beck. And in this episode, James talks all about how they've grown and what they have been doing as a firm and the scale they've reached since. In this conversation, we dive into exactly what it takes to scale a consulting business and talk about the lessons and advice that James has had and has been given since that last conversation. We talk about everything from building out a leadership team to expanding into new markets to investing in your talent and your culture, even during those tough economic times. James is, as you will hear, hugely candid, open, just refreshingly honest about the challenges that he and the team at Albany Beck have faced, the lessons he's learned, and really the mindset shifts that have helped him and the team thrive. So if you are looking for practical advice on leadership, on talent, on growing your consultancy from someone who has been there and has done that, or is literally doing that, then this is the episode for you. So with the intro done, please enjoy today's conversation with James Constable. JC, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Great to have you back. Obviously, we've been talking a little while already, which we may or may not share with our listeners, so that people can pick up where they left off. Because obviously, we've spoken a lot since our last interview. What was daunting to me is it was 3 years ago.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I remember we were right in the deepest, darkest depths of lockdown, weren't we? Because we did it all. I remember being in my office, and yeah.
Well, and it's I always remember that when we first started working together, that first workov. Do you remember it was the day before the lockdown ban?
Was it?
Yeah, I remember it was me and Dan came down on the what was it, November the whenever, because it was the day before
was
we were all
Post-its.
Yeah, the Post-its.
So they probably stayed up for 2 years. If we just literally picked up our stuff and ran for lockdown, then they might have been there they might still be there.
Well, they were that good. That's why they were there. Nothing to do with lockdown.
Yeah.
But do you want to start by filling our listeners in? Tell me the journey you've been on in those 3 years. Where have you and Albany Beck been since we last spoke for the show?
Oh, Christ. That's a big question to start with, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, look, our last 18 months have been fairly difficult. Anyone that I think works in professional services that says they've had a great time of it would be fibbing. We came out the traps really quickly during lockdown and we grew really quickly. And that's great. That's really exciting. It's that proper sort of startup feel. And then when you get to some listeners would think this isn't critical mass. When you sort of get to a slight critical mass of sort of above 300 consultants out, what you then have to start to put in is some rigor around allowing those people to feel like they're part of your business, that they're on a career journey with your company. And I think like when we first spoke, it was all just fun. You know, let's get as many people onto assignment. Let's win as many bids as we possibly can. You know, what's our raison d'etre? Who cares? Let's like shoot for the stars and all that stuff. And then, you know, for the last 3 years, it's been sort of, you know, making sure those people that work here and have been for a long time, you know, make sure they're seeing a proper career at Albany Beck, that they don't necessarily need to go to a competitor to rise the ranks, to not just in terms of, you know, title, but in terms of salary and all that kind of stuff. Making sure that the client is happy with what we're providing as a service. And then sort of like, you know, the rolling maul of, you know, what else we can help with, and sort of becoming famous in that one bit is great, but actually there's so many more facets to what we do. And it's really like highlighting how that works from a client side, and then really setting your head office team up in order to go to the next level. And I think that's probably been one of our biggest achievements, I think, in the last few years, whilst competing against one of the toughest economic climates I reckon I've ever known. And, you know, I sort of got into this at the end of the 90s, and we had sort of the downturn that was the sort of September the 11th era. And then we had Lehman Brothers. The last 18 months feels way worse.
How come?
Because I don't know, like my wife was at Lehman Brothers when it went under. She was actually on the cover of the Metro with her brown box.
Wow.
So it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
I just feel this is death by 1,000 cuts. Definitely don't want to get political, but Lehman Brothers was like a short, sharp pain point. I didn't really have my parents talking to me about Lehman Brothers and what it did to the market. It feels centered around financial services. I seem to feel that it was more of a V-shaped recovery than this. I don't even know what this is. It's an L at the moment. I don't even know. You know, there's signs that it's starting to get better, but this just feels like it's really drawn out, and certainly compounded with the fact that third-party spending has been sort of tailed back a little bit, and yet, you know, with financial services, yet investment banks are posting record profits. And, you know, I spoke to the COO of one of our clients recently, and they're like very aware that that's because of interest rates is benefiting them. And when they start to come down, what they're going to be left with is additional cost in terms of employment that's gone up since the end of lockdown. And so all of this is playing into this sort of storm, really, of like, let's be a little careful of where we're spending our money. So that's why it feels a little bit worse, I think, than the Lehman's days. You know, I've got, you know, my parents talk about the cost of living and energy prices and interest rates and all that kind of stuff. Whereas with Lehman's, they just were like, is it bad? And I was like, well, they owe us almost £1 million that I don't think we'll ever see. So yeah, it's sort of bad for us. And Sophie works there, so that's really bad. And they're like, oh, shame. Are we doing Sunday lunch? Whereas this is, you know, they talk to me often about it, and, you know, are feeling similar sort of pains in terms of how much their Sunday lunch now costs at their local pub.
They're not inviting you around for Sunday lunch anymore. It's,
yeah, I have to bring my own beef.
Well, and it is an interesting point. And how have you as a firm and also you as a leader responded to that? Because to your point, the COVID period for everyone was brilliant. Your business really grew.
You can't say that if someone lost a relative during COVID. Got to be a little careful how you phrase that.
Very true. For businesses, largely,
businesses, yeah.
You are right. It wasn't great for everyone. Thank you for correcting me. How have you responded to that? Because you mentioned you're having to almost build that vision for people. You're building the plane, if you like, in flight while you're going through these turbulent skies.
It's a good analogy.
Thank you. I was running. I was trying to make one as we go. I was building the plane in flight.
You really were.
How have you and the firm kind of approached that to do as well as you can in the, as you say, toughest environment you've known since you've been working?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I know we're a better business now than we were 18 months ago. We've had to make sure that we sort of put that rigor in place to make sure that people are feeling looked after and cared for. You know, we've concentrated on stuff that, if I'm being completely honest with myself, I probably didn't see as a priority 2 or 3 years ago. Our priorities have shifted. I think that, I'm not going to sit here as the CEO of this business and say that revenue isn't absolutely key, because it is the key thing. With revenue comes everything else. But I think it's a sort of and the or. Before it would just be, revenue is really number one. I think now it has to be that the and is that we have the revenue, we put a big focus on the revenue, and we have this sort of holistic care. So we've scaled up our engagement management team. We've put more sort of structure in. We're doing it at the moment. We had a meeting this morning about it, more on site for consultants from junior, because, the whole piece of our business is pyramid model. So, you've got people that are in their 50s and they're sort of stalwarts of the finance industry running large teams, and they have their lieutenants and they have their lieutenants. And then at the sort of bottom of that pyramid, you have the more junior guys. And it's making sure that that trickle down effect works, that everyone is feeling like they're all pulling together. And we've probably had to do that on steroids in the last 18 months to make sure that people are feeling like they're being supported by the business, whilst an eye on revenue. And anyone that says that's sort of superfluous to everything is unfortunately probably telling you porkies.
It's an interesting question. What led you to have that change in priorities? Because to your point, you've grown up with revenue being the key. We're in the toughest revenue-focused environment we've ever been. Doesn't sound like where most people would broaden those priorities. What changed for you?
Well, as I say, it was more of a bolt-on. So we haven't changed the priority of revenue growth. That's really key for us. I think it's key for every business. It was just about, if you've got sort of a finite pot of money to invest each year, where does that investment go? So during COVID, that investment went into people that could walk the corridors, sell our services, transact. We have actually, I'd say we're just cheesy as it is, I'd say we have bought in the dip. We made some really key investments last year. We hired a new head of Ireland, Paul, who joined us from a competitor. We hired Harry to run the UK business, who joined from a competitor. So I definitely don't think we stopped doing that. I think we just added on the additional bits of the, overlove the people that you've already got. And I'm not sure it's always dictated by the economic climate. I think it's also dictated by the fact that you get to a certain size and people start to feed back. I'm really candid, I am. Communication's not great at Albany Beck. And the consultants would be very quick and clear to tell us that your communication isn't great. And so, even I know this sounds so sort of rudimentary, but, creating a good intranet where we can advertise internal roles, socials, people can sort of come on there and there's quizzes and, all that kind. It probably wasn't a priority during COVID, weirdly, but I don't think this is dictated by the downturn. I think it's more dictated by the business that we've become and the fact that, people are sort of saying, well, hold on a sec, if I feel I've hit a glass ceiling in this business, where's next? And so we have, what's been amazing over the last 18 months is our internal mobility is fantastic and people move from one project to another. We have that internalization piece, which, I spoke about on the last podcast, which clients are enjoying and relishing, being able to retain your intellectual property rather than it go across the street, but it being a sort of fluid notion, really. You can or you don't have to. And I think that appeals also to our own employees. There's a lady who worked for us over in Ireland that started a competitor, not a competitor, one of our clients. And within 3 months, they called us and said, do you want her? Well, we want her to go permanently with us. The regulator would prefer it. And a simple conversation with her to say, what do you want to do? And she said, look, I really like it here. I can see myself staying. No offense, they offer a better map package than you. And I might have children in the future. So I'm up for it. And it was, let's do it. One person. Now, there's plenty of people that would say that's not very commercial and, you're sort of cutting your own throat. I've heard banded about. Totally disagree. Firms that dig in for one person, I just find it so short-sighted. I mean, that lady who ended up transitioning over to be a permanent member, I think at one point we had 40 consultants with her because she felt like she was one of us, that she would only come to us. So why wouldn't you commercially choose that? I don't know. Maybe I'm giving away too many trade secrets here. Got to be a little careful. But I just think, there's so many unique things of AB. And I think that internalization piece is definitely one of them. I don't understand that sort of like, it's my football and I'll take it home with me if I want.
Yeah, well, and like you say, I know we touched on it on the last conversation, and it is a core part of your business, but that overarching doing right by people, building the I find really interesting. You mentioned, and it might have been that feedback, but what told you the time was right? You mentioned that critical mass. Is that advice you had from someone else? Is it a journey you'd seen before? Was it, your colleagues, your consultants? How did you know the time was right to add the
I don't think I could take credit for that. I've got a phenomenal leadership team. And I think it was, if I'm being completely honest, it was probably because the moaning was getting greater. The moaning from internal workforce, asking for better transparency on communication, what's next, my career. I don't think I can sit here and sort of arrogantly say that I woke up one day and went, right, and today we'll do this. And then my leadership team are very good at managing upwards. And so, it would have been a sort of perfect storm of them being closer to the action than me, seeing what could be better about this business, taking great delight in feeding that up to me. I probably maybe waited a little longer than they probably liked, and then we acted. So I don't think there's a switch that flicks that says, now we're at 300, now we need to go nap on building that out. I think it's just, I really encourage in every part of the business for people to have open and transparent communication. So it would be weird if they were getting talked to about some niggles in the business and that didn't get, what's the point in them saying it if it doesn't feed up to me? So I'm taking no credit for that. This was the leadership team that was sort of imploring, look, if we want to be a better business, this is what we do. My role really is to work out what the priorities are in terms of growth, in terms of strategy, in terms of where we spend our money.
And maybe to that point then, a better question, which to your point, you can give some guidance on is how do you cultivate that in your leadership team? And then how do you know which fire to pick? Because I'm sure running a firm the size you have, there will be lots of fires at any one point. How do you decide which fire is the one that actually you should, as a leadership team and as an organization, you should fix?
Gosh, I don't think there's necessarily a perfect science for that. I think that you do have lots of fires burning and you've just got to work out, why do we want to make sure that everybody in this business is feeling valued? Let's be completely honest, so they don't leave. Let's call a spade a spade, so they don't leave. And so I want them to feel like they've got a career here, but ultimately what it boils down to is that I'm growing a business. And if people don't feel that we have their back, they're going to go somewhere that does. So that's a fairly big fire, I think. If you don't address that fire, there's other fires going on in the business all the time that it can wait till tomorrow. We had a meeting this morning with someone about brand awareness, really important. They showed me some phenomenal things. Yeah, brilliant. It could probably wait. There's other things. There's also pressing issues that we probably need to do, but also not to, to sort of respectfully, have one eye on one thing, but also, to address and adhere to something else. It's a balancing act and it's not easy. The leadership team that I've chosen are not backwards in coming forwards. So because we encourage challenge and transparency, as a result, you hear it all and you then get to decide. And sometimes you choose the right fire to put out and sometimes you don't. It's definitely not a perfect science. But I think we have a duty of care, a responsibility when you get to a certain point for people to say, yeah, I'm working for a proper business. It's not a startup anymore. It's not 60 people that are sort of winging it. It's a proper shop.
Yeah. To your point of leadership team, because it's something I was keen to pick up as well. And maybe we start with, you mentioned obviously Paul and Harry coming in to lead the respective countries. And something I've always admired and seen with you, Jess, is you seem very deliberate about to your point of being deliberate about the people you pick, who, where, and when. And maybe to start, what led you to say, I need some country leads? What was that thought process that said, actually, this is that next step in our structure?
With Ireland, it was really simple. A great guy, Adam Kelly, who is, as you know, is London-based, Irish, London-based. He originally came to me and said, look, we need to be considering Ireland, this was a few years ago now, as a nearshore location for financial services, especially after Brexit. There's a lot of stuff that we specialize in that's going to get pushed to Ireland. So it was Adam that sort of got in my ear on that. We then opened Ireland, saw great success in Ireland. And then in the last 18 months, that sort of dwindled a little bit because the Irish economy has faltered a little bit. And so I'm a sort of believer in sort of laser focus. I'm sort of saying to Adam, listen, you've got to be, treading the streets every day. You've got to be going to forums. You've got to make yourself available. He's got a young child, another one on the way. He's like, I can't move back to Dublin. I don't want to. And I was like, great. So we both together went out and found a country head. And those guys are sort of working perfectly in harmony at the moment. Lennon McCartney, it's fantastic. And Adam will go off, he's successfully opened another country for us. He'll go off and open another country for us, but probably from the UK. Although he tells me if it's Sydney, he'll happily go. I don't know what his problem with Dublin is, but he'll have to go there.
If it's a warm and sunny country, Dubai would be the next one.
Well, that's actually also on his radar. So yeah, I think it's more dictated by that. And so for me, you've got to be all in. You've got to be all in, and we're all in Ireland. And so hiring a senior country head who's ex Big Four, ex big consultancy, it was the perfect fit. And it was the right thing to do, because there is things that he is doing through osmosis of just being local and present. Clients want to have a chat with you and they want to see you tomorrow. It required Adam or me or Celia, to jump on a flight and go over there. And it's not good for ESG, but also it's not good for home life. And so that was very much for Ireland. In the UK, we were, so again, that was more on Phil's side. Phil was saying to me, well, we want to scale this business. But for us to scale this business, I sort of need to relinquish some of my day-to-day management responsibilities. So we went out and found a really strong leader in Harry, who actually, if I'm being honest, has managed bigger teams than he's managing right now for me. But that's with a view for that to change over the coming 12 months. And so that again was working in unison with, I don't just like do it and then tell everyone to just get in line. It's like, well, Phil, what do you want to do in the future? Great. Well, that's not this role. But we can't afford for someone not to be doing this role. So let's go out and find somebody. So we, again, did it together, brought Harry in, started last October, and, it was fantastic. And so then that's enabled Phil then to go on, who's become the chief revenue officer here, has allowed him to go on and do a sort of more 10,000 foot view on the business. And, it's all great.
I love it. And to your point, I guess within that, JC, is the care for and consideration of those key people, those conversations with Adam, with Phil. Great to hear Adam's got another on the way, by the way.
Yes.
If he's here today,
he's upstairs.
I'll have to say hello to him.
Yeah.
If you are currently searching for even more to help you improve your consultancy, then I have something for you that is going to improve your consultancy's marketing. If you go to createengage.co.uk/insights, you can find our super detailed, super practical ebook that will let you build an effective marketing strategy for your consultancy, giving you the tools you need to outpace your competitors and deliver that all-important ROI from your marketing. createengage.co.uk/insights, and I look forward to hearing what you think of the ebook. I guess an interesting question, and again, thinking of things that our listeners will be wondering or will have struggled with. And this is where I think the story you've just told, you've probably got some great advice here, is the way you've described it sounds very easy in terms of hiring. Hiring in our industry is often very hard. And the higher up you get in the tree, the more often I'd say I have seen it go wrong. I don't want to judge others, but I have seen a lot of consultancies where they, to your point, they hire someone senior to lead a practice, a country, a team, and it doesn't work out. What was your approach with Paul and Harry to make sure they were right? What are those steps if someone wanted to do the same? What would they do?
I'm a typical entrepreneur. I'm always looking for the yes. So, when I meet with Paul, I'm desperate. And it wasn't just Paul I met 3 or 4 people. I'm desperate for Paul to be the man. So I'm sitting there and
I felt that myself, Jess. It's always, this is the one.
And I'm just, and you're sort of constantly, going, yes, like this is it. This is the silver bullet that is required. You then have to sort of take a step back and say to yourself, look, have you got rose tinted glasses? You can put a few measures in to test whether they are what they say they are. Referencing people is really key. CV speaks volumes. It's old school stuff, people that have hopped around. The firm that Paul came from, I respect them. I know the CEO, I respect the business. They don't suffer fools. So to be in that position, he's obviously, that's sort of like a big tick. And then you put it on them and you really test them how much they want it. Talk to me about what your plan is. The way I set this business up is that it's really cliched, but I sort of like people to feel that they are owners of this business. And there are some people that are literally owners in terms of sort of shares, and there's some people that are here to work towards that ownership. And so when you put it back to them and say, look, you as the owner of part of this business, what are you going to do? What's impactful for you? And then really like picking that apart and saying to yourself, what are they really going down to? You know, the amount of times I hear people talking about, and we have some amazing non-execs in this business, and the amount of times I hear people sort of going, you know, it's all about, you know, we've really got to spend like 6 to 12 months analyzing your go-to-market strategy and all this stuff. Yeah, like it has its place. But really, you know, Paul was straight into the like revenue and growth and understanding what we do and all that great stuff. But really, you know, how are we going to actually tackle the big issues? And I think that sets us apart from a lot of those big firms, although I think probably the big four are maybe addressing that a little bit more now, where they're bringing people more into focus on the most important things. But, you know, I interviewed somebody who was sort of talking so big picture, that 2 years of them coming on here was so big picture. And I was like, that's great if you're at McKinsey's. That's amazing. We're not McKinsey's. And I'm in the trenches with my bayonet on. Are you going to be in the trenches with me with your bayonet on? Are we going to go over the top together? That's really what you're looking for. And I think some people just, they don't do that due diligence. I think when you hire someone senior, you've got to look at it like you're buying their business. You know, I know from firsthand how laborious a due diligence process is, but they do it on purpose. So their bet, it's still a bet, but it's way more of a measured bet and much less of a gamble. But you don't always get it right. You don't always get it right.
Well, and that's why I ask, because, you know, to your point, we have a lot of listeners who are entrepreneurs like yourself. I have exactly had that same problem, those happy years, and I want everyone to work. And actually that, how you distinguish those, and to your point of that due diligence, understand that kind of listen to what they're saying. And in the consulting space, you want practical, not, you know, let's do some workshops for a year. And I think the CV bit makes sense. Is there anything else you do or have done to say, yeah, this, like, I'm comfortable, this is the best bet? Like, any other things you do for that due diligence when you're looking at people of that level?
Yeah, but if I tell you, then
secret sauce.
Anyone who listens, yeah, you've got to take it away from them. So you've got to take it away from them a little bit, and you've got to see how hungry they are for the opportunity. So I'll probably just leave it at that.
Fair enough. We will, yeah.
People that don't jump on it, it shows that they're probably haven't got the right. I'm after street fighters. I like street fights. I like that guile, that grit, you know.
We got bayonets, we got street fights. So I'm now scared to go upstairs, JC.
Yeah. We're about to get like the octagon out here and have a complete UFC fight. No, but it's all about like all that is energy and a focus. And, you know, I've worked with people where they just haven't really been out of second gear. And I pay quite well. You know, I've got really good, you know, as the Pied Piper, I feel like I'm taking people on a good journey. You don't have to match my tenacity or intensity per se, but like come close to it if you can. What I don't want is, you know, if I'm running at 100 miles an hour, they're running at 20 miles an hour. And so, yeah, that's really key.
Well, I was going to ask you about, you just used the phrase again, and it was something I know when we prepped for this, you talked to me about. I'd love
to
understand.
Prepped for this.
Well,
this is completely.
This is, but obviously I do my preparation, JC, as a diligent host for you. That point of high pay, high expectations, I guess, how have you built that kind of leadership style, and how do you build that and instill that within the team, I guess, to help those who want to achieve those goals, and also to make clear what those expectations are? Because some people can say that, but it's not clear what high expectation is. How do you balance that and make it clear for your team so that they know, yeah, they need to be at 50 miles or 80 miles an hour versus 20?
I don't know if I've always got this right, but I just think that, you know, I'm a strong believer in, you can say anything to somebody, like anything, as long as it's said in the right way, in the right fashion, in a respectable way, and then to frame it in the right way, to say, you know, this is why I'm saying this, and this is what we need to do. And I think as long as you do that, then people sort of like feel the pain with you. If I just sort of called someone up and said, right, this year I need 10 million of GP out of you, and put the phone down, they would probably think, well, he needs 10 million of GP out of me because he wants to, you know, buy a Ferrari or something, you know, stupid. I think having transparency, bringing people on the journey, making people sort of responsible for what their part in the process is. Paul knows that his part in the process is the Irish P&L will grow this year. And he has lots of tools to help him, grow that. But ultimately, he has to be responsible for that. And before he's even signed his contract, this is what your responsibility is. This is the part you're going to play in the journey of AB. And I think that sort of transcends through every part of the business. What's the role you're going to play? And I've been okay at it, but I'm trying to get better at it. And I think this year for me is all about, this is what I'm going to do. Whether you're the CEO of the business, whether you're leading a practice, whether you're on reception, what is it that you're going to do? And let's measure that and not do it in a sort of belittling, or just to be like celebrating that success. And to say, I said this to you at the start of the year, and look at this is what I've done. And I did it by September. Brilliant, amazing. And it's really about that sort of angle, I think, rather than it just be, I kick the ball, you fetch it, sort of table thumpy. I think that's completely, thank God, is being phased out of lots of leadership stuff.
Why is it the focus for this year?
I think that the sort of 3 a.m. voices that I refer to a lot in my narrative with people is, I've gone and hired a really strong leadership team. We've bought in the dip, much to whether I was throwing caution to win, a measured gamble. There's some phenomenal talent, by the way, on the market at the moment. And I'd rather get that talent now, and then we come out of this downturn with being a much better business for it than, fighting with everybody else for that person at the sort of top of the market. And what I think scares me, or what a big risk to this business, is that people like sort of crossover and sort of a Venn diagram. And apart from the obvious where, I thought that was your job. That was my, gosh, sorry. And it doesn't get done by anyone, is that I think to maximize everybody, to maximize their output, they need to be in their own lanes. And so this year is the year that, I haven't just made investments at the top table, I've made investments further down, which I think will prove dividends this year. But in terms of our cost base, it's the highest it's ever been. And from that, I expect that, we are a much better business from it, and we'll make more money from it. But I want each individual to sort of stand up and be counted, and there not to be an element of, well, I thought that was their job. I didn't realize that was my job. And we're sort of halfway through the year and people are doing a bit of a job share. Safe to say that's not happening, but it requires a little bit of rigor around, this is what you're going to do this year, and this is what you're going to do this year. And it's come because we grew last year as a business, we grew more senior people. And I, as a byproduct, I've had to do that. I think when you're a smaller company, you get to say, it's a bit of a muck in, everyone does it. And this year it's about saying, we've done that investment and you don't have to all muck in now. And I think that 2 + 2 can equal 10, because you've now got people in the seat that are doing their role rather than people doing each other's.
It makes a lot of sense. And I love what you say about the kind of positive angle of the measurements. How do you mention around, I love the idea, you can say anything if you say it in the right way. How do you manage that in terms of, Brits are we typically take criticism negatively, whether it is or not. And measures can sometimes feel like, to your point, that even if they're not intended to, if you don't hit them, it's a negative, it's a criticism. How have you positioned it so that it's seen, whatever happens as a positive?
I try and avoid it being a criticism per se. I think if you get ahead of stuff and you have more, conversation is more and often, then I think the criticism comes when you look back retrospectively and say, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. I mean, ultimately, you should get to a point where you know if it's going to happen or not. And so you're constantly chunking it down through baby steps and saying, are we doing this? You said you can do this. So it makes it sound like it's a real meritocracy. But, I suppose what I'm saying is building up to us being on the same page constantly, as opposed to, you won't see me until 6 months and I'm going to come back and mark your homework. That's, I think, where certainly Brits have an allergic reaction to that kind of stuff, because I just think that it's patronizing, it's belittling. I think if you're there with them and saying, what can we help with? What's going to, big question that we ask ourselves, what are the risks of this not happening? Then you can sort of meet everything at the pass and stop a failure happening. It's not always a perfect science, because failures do happen, but it's almost like it's been triaged before it happens. And you can say, well, actually, you and I both knew this was going to happen. So we're really agile as a business. So we can quickly move to the next thing. That whole try lots of things, keep what works. I think what we're good at is not letting it get to the point where it is a failure, sort of seeing the writing on the wall and then pivoting really quickly and moving on to something else. And so I think as a result, you don't necessarily get that 6 months, I haven't spoken to you and you failed. And now we're going to start to talk about your, position in this business. I think you need to go way back 5 more steps before that.
No, I love that. And I think you're right that it guides the conversations rather than it being like, say, oh, it's 6 months' time, you haven't hit your thing, because that doesn't help anyone. And I was going to come back to this, and now feels as good a time as any, is, that growth journey. Obviously, as you've grown, you mentioned you tried a lot of things, you've grown the team. One thing I see for some boutique consultancies is they kind of hit a ceiling because of the talent, the team, the size of the team. Something I think you've been very good at is, and you touched on there with country heads, is always thinking about, well, what's the next step we need in the structure? What's the next level? I guess, how do you think about that? I know you gave the examples with Phil and Adam, but how do you think, what is it we need in this part of the business? And when, I always think you hear a lot in Silicon Valley about bringing, someone had a head of operations and they bring a COO in and above them. I always think it sounds really easy on paper, but sounds really uncomfortable in practice. I don't know if you've ever had to build that type of org structure, and how have you kind of decided you need to make those changes, and how have you approached that?
Gosh, I make it sound like I'm a bit blasé about it. I mean, I have hired a COO previously, and he was a lovely man and came from a competitor. But it became very apparent within his first few months, really, that he wasn't doing anything different to what we were currently doing. He'd oversold himself definitely in the interview and sort of to make himself be more senior than he is. And it was just one of those things where we were like, this is great, probably if we're a 2,000 person business, but actually right now we're not that. And that was a really sort of pleasant conversation with him, because I could tell that he was getting frustrated. I was getting frustrated. There was a little bit of a sort of feedback session to him to say, look, you've sort of sold yourself as this massive COO. You aren't that yet. I think there is a role for you in a business, but it's probably a bigger business than ours, but a smaller role. So this is not perfect. This business is not perfect. It's definitely made mistakes. Your question was?
Well, I think you've kind of got, it's a good example. So the question was around more, I guess, touching on that, the kind of, how do you decide who you need in a role and when you need, normally people, I'd say, as you grow, it's the larger role, but deciding that skill set. And so I don't know if that's the example. It's an interesting one to dig into, but I do think that kind of knowing the size of role you need for the size of business you are can be something that many consultancies, I guess, they put off having what you described, kind of the potentially uncomfortable but pleasant conversation, which stalls growth. And I guess maybe that's in that case, how you knew, no, this is not the right type of person for the type of role. We need someone different. You mentioned type of things they were doing. What else tells you actually this might not be the right fit for a role like that?
I think that you have to constantly, I possess this really annoying thing that is great and also super annoying, which is this positive paranoia. There is not a moment where I stop thinking about Albany Beck. And I feel a bit like, I don't know if you're a football guy, Nick, but, sort of, was it Claudio Ranieri who was called the Tinker Man? He would constantly tinker with his team. And I constantly feel like, what can be tinkered with the team? Is that person, they're the right person in the wrong seat? And I never stop. It's exhausting. The amount of emails I send myself at sort of the middle of the night with ideas that I can do, and most of them I ignore. But some of them are useful. I don't know. I mean, I'd love to give you some sort of Harvard management spiel about, these are your sort of red, amber, greens. I just think that you're be really close to your own business. Look at where its frailties are. Look at where its weaknesses are. What can you get better at? Do you think that can be addressed by bringing people in? Do you think that could be addressed by just sort of changing parts of the current setup? And act, I think people don't act enough, do something. But do it in the right way and, be respectful to other people and consult with them and see if it's the right thing. We all decided as a leadership team, it's about time we had a COO. And then it turned out we didn't need a COO, or at least we didn't need that COO. Maybe we did need a COO that could come in and sort of do things in a different function and sort of show their value in that sense. But, without going too much into, and apologies if the COO, I know that he's gone on to have a phenomenal career. So, apologies to
all's
that.
well that ends well.
Exactly. But, it's just constantly reviewing your own company all the time and part your ego. You never get it right all the time. I'm trying to practice it a bit more, but I don't know if you've heard of servant leadership.
I've heard of the concept, but elaborate.
Well, as you've heard of it, I'm going to try not to blag it. So servant leadership very much is allowing everyone around you to feel like they are the most responsible for that success. And I'd like to think, although this will be listened to by Albany Beck people and they will probably be sending this as a soundbite, I'd like to think that I'm not massively egotistical.
We clip that up as a little meme if you want, JC.
Yeah, just they can post it on all their socials, as the new Gen Zers say. And I think like doing the sort of servant leadership element is, everybody feels so much prouder when we are successful. Sometimes it can mean that people think that they are the most important person in the room, which is fine. Allow them to think that. I don't think we lose people to competitors because they feel that they are the most important person in the business. I think it's more empowering than it is anything else. But the whole premise of servant leadership is that you lead a business through allowing others to claim the wins. That's what it is in a nutshell. And I'd like to think that I do that. Again, I might be challenged on that, but I'd like to think that it's a very egoless business. And when people are successful, they generally feel that they're successful because of them. And I've helped shepherd that along the process, And I mean, ultimately, I've worked and have worked for leaders that they have to be the person whose name is in lights. They have to be that person who, and I think you get this in big corporations where, that's how you rise the ranks, that greasy pole of corporate structure where it has to be you at the top. And I just think it's crap, if I'm being honest. I think it's fundamentally flawed. If you've chosen the right team, then it's a bit like you have children. I have 3 children. If your children are doing well and they're successful, like they've done it, you're the parent, you're responsible a lot of the time for that success. But don't let your kid come home and be like, I got 20 out of 20. Be like, you only did that because I spent Saturday afternoon with you. And without that, you're crap. Allow them to be like, yes, you've done really well. So literally, going down to the most sort of binary example.
The opposite of servant leadership. I love that as an example, JC. And I think implicit in what you've touched on and kind of that theme throughout this section has been that I like what you said around take action, and actually action not necessarily meaning, to your point, the kind of old school, we'll chop that, we'll cut this, more you having those conversations. And I think so often you only have to open up a social media app, to your point, what the young people do, to see a quote about, well, the difficult conversation is the step to what you want, or whatever the memes are. But I think it comes through in what you've talked about with bringing your country heads in, with your conversation with your COO. Because you mentioned around if he's listening or not. I always think we have this wrong narrative that let's say if someone doesn't work out in a job, they are bad. And actually, so often it's a fit thing. To your point,
totally.
This person's gone on, had a great career. It's not they're good or bad. It's right or wrong. This is not the place for them, and that's fine.
I gave a reference for that COO, saying that they're an absolute great hire, just not the right hire that we needed at the time. And we have to take some responsibility for that, I think. They have to take a bit of responsibility as well, but we should take responsibility for that. I think for me, what sort of distills down in all the questions that you've been asking me so far, attitude is absolutely everything. Attitude trumps most things. And if people possess the right attitude, it's for me a matter of timing. I think, is that the Branson quote about, which is it? Like, luck is hard work, meeting opportunity, or something else cheesy like that. I do love Branson, but that attitude is everything. If you possess the right attitude, you're doing the right things, it will come. It might not come in the right timeline that you want it to come in, but it will come. And the attitude is, you can't really teach it. And so attitude is everything you need to look for. Going back to it, when you interview people, have they got the right attitude? Because if they display that and they're doing the right attitude, then results always come.
This is, I know, a hard question to answer. What do you look for in that attitude? What makes you sit across someone and go, yeah, that's the attitude we look for? It's
very hard before they start. When they start, really quickly if someone possesses the right attitude to be the best version of themselves they can be. There's someone who works for me called Ella, and Ella started, she's fairly junior, not massively junior, but fairly junior. This girl's attitude is unbelievable. Like, it's constantly like, what can I do more of? And I'm sure she won't mind me saying it took her a little while to get up and running. But in that time, she was out meeting every client. She was running her own round tables with HSBC around diversity and inclusion. She set up these groups for people within the business to feel more accepted. Christ alive, we were all sort of sat there going, this is unbelievable. Now, not for 1 second did we think that she wouldn't become successful. If you look at the barometer of success of just being revenue, it took her a little longer than she probably would have wanted. She was doing so much within that sort of delta of, when the money, and now this year she will be, I hope there's no sort of competitors listening. Literally giving them
we can bleep out a name if you want, JC.
No, leave her in. She deserves the credit. Yeah? And hopefully, let's practice what I preach, right? Hopefully I've set the right business up so people don't need to leave, okay? Next time we sit down, it'll be like, so Ella left and Adam left and Paul left and Phil left. You leave her name in by all means. But she is brilliant. And this year, what's happening is all of that hard work, all that positive attitude, all of that, what is in this business that I can really pour accelerant on is now coming back. She'll be probably one of my highest earning people in the business this year. And it hasn't because she's suddenly gone, oh, I've did all that. That was not the right thing to do. She just kept looking under all these different stones and eventually it's come good. So that is Ella's a great example of the right attitude. And for some people, they don't possess the same, and they still, I want to make, I'm not after, a whole room full of, I can't even think of someone better to use, but, sort of Lympha Christies or, it doesn't have to be all that Albany Beck, but we're not very good at sort of suffering fools or suffering lazy people. I know we're not. The reason for that is because we are all ambitious. We want this business. There's going to be a point this year where I go out to market to, sell part of the business. There's some shareholders in the business that are looking for a potential exit, and I'll go out and look for a new partner that can then take us to the next level. And I want people that are shoulder to shoulder with me that revel in that and think, yeah, it's amazing. Let's get to 1,000 consultants. Let's get to 2,000 consultants. Let's really go for it. And so that's what it is, really.
I love it. Well, and we've got another clip there. We can put that up, and that's the modern day for sale sign, JC. But it's a nice segue
for the right price.
For the right, reassuringly expensive. that'll be the strap line. If you are enjoying this episode, if you've got anything from this episode, my question to you is, why keep it to yourself? The whole reason I started this podcast was to share knowledge from guests like this with you. And I would like to ask you to do the same. Please, if you are enjoying this episode, take a moment and hit share and send it to a friend, send it to a colleague, send it to a client, send it to anyone that you think will benefit from it, because you've benefited from it. And the way we make our industry better is by sharing and helping each other. I hope that you and your friend enjoy talking about this episode, enjoy sharing the learnings, and I hope you enjoy the rest of today's conversation. Well, and it's a nice segue because we've covered a lot of the people stuff, which I think's been fascinating for me, and also just fascinating to hear how you and the firm has grown over that time. I actually wanted to touch on one of the revenue aspects, which will nicely segue for anyone listening who you've just piqued their ears. I'm sure this will be interesting because I think we touched on the island business, and growing in any international market is hard. It's something that I have seen so many consulting firms try. Most of them seem to go to the US. You might know why people
flying on Monday morning, actually.
Oh, are you? Well, you will, and maybe this is maybe I'll frame it this way then, because you have the playbook from Ireland. You have successfully built a business in Ireland. How did you approach that? And this might be trade secret, so if you can't say I understand, but how are you approaching the US? Because that is something so few consultancies, that international growth is something so few consultancies get right.
There's a couple of things that you have to do. You've got to have a good product. I'm really proud of the product we offer at Albany Beck. I feel it's definitely different to most things that are out there. You've got our 80% of our revenue comes from our senior consulting piece. We don't do any advisory work. We do execution. No offense to traditional consultants. We don't really put consultants into firms. I think the sort of great presentation skills, the $5,000 suit, I think it has its place. Obviously, it's a multi-trillion pound industry, but we just don't do it. We put in people that are, they've got the battle scars and the grey hair from doing it before. And that gives us sort of reassuring lens to our stakeholders that actually sit opposite people that go, yeah, you're one of us, you know how that is. So set your product up right. We've got this junior academy model. It's not hire, train, deploy. It's a junior academy model that feeds into our existing workforce and supplements some of these big programs that we can then push that cost on to the client, that cost saving onto the client, because they don't have to spend £1,000 a day for an analyst that you would get necessarily from Big Four. So it all just works really well. And I don't know anyone that's doing that, if I'm being completely honest. I know people that do the junior part really well. I know the people that do the senior part really well. And I don't really know many people that are bridging the gap. So get your product right. Listen to your client. What's their 3 a.m. voices?
Well, how do you even, and just to jump in, because this is something I'm sure you've done as part of it. How do you even get to hear their 3 a.m. voices? You land in a new country. How do you get that first conversation? In Ireland, how did you get that first conversation to find out?
Well, you got to go back one step.
Okay.
You got to follow the money. And then from that, if you've got clients you're working with, and we're fortunate because we're financial services, so our client base is global. So, if you've got client sponsors in the UK that enjoy your product, that think it's great, that it addresses, and from 360 feedback with them, that they're telling you what they like about it, whether it's internalization or whether it's you putting doers in rather than advisors and all that great stuff. It's really quite simple. Is there anyone in the organization that can benefit from this sort of model? Quite often, we don't even have to ask the question. We'll get introduced. So next week, I'm in New York for a week. I've got about 20 meetings. And it's because the client base in the UK and Ireland, and we do some work in Luxembourg, and we do, some stuff around Europe, because they've been in an exco. Someone has said, I'm just a bit disgruntled with delete ad name. And they've said, well, have you thought about speaking to Albany Beck? And so I know it's a really cliche. There's like land and expand and follow the money, but actually, well, you're not really following the money. You're following your reputational legacy. And so what you do is it's almost like a sort of rangefinder, because what you'll end up doing is we went to Ireland very much to help supplement a massive program I work through a large German investment bank. And you go there with that in mind. You set your stall up to assist them. And then you start to have a look around and start to talk to your client base about operations they've got over there. You hire people over there that say, oh, actually, I'm not bad in FS, but I've got a bit of retail or fund services. And then suddenly you're not operating purely in capital markets. You're starting to work within fund services and fund administration. And it's this sort of like evolving reputation that enables you to get in the room. So I would never advise anyone to like all of a sudden jump on a flight to like Austin and start cold calling, because that must be really hard. If they've got people that can vouch for them, everyone who listens to this knows that the best form of business development is introductions. You never, unless your mail shots are so amazing, it's never really going to be like, I've got an 80-person change requirement that I need, and I've never heard of any consultancy, so I need you. It's through that element of they've dealt with you, they trust you, you've delivered under budget, ahead of process. That's why, it goes all the way back to like that reputation. And reputations, I think Warren Buffett, said it took 35 years to build Berkshire Hathaway's reputation. It can be destroyed in 35 minutes or 35 seconds. So anyone who's looking at global expansion should look at what they're doing at home, looking at how that can help assist them in their first deployments abroad. And then when they're sort of self-fulfilling and self-basting from a finance capacity, they start to then add numbers and add heads, what other verticals can benefit from your amazing model that got you there in the first place? I know that I'm having conversations up and down the East Coast at the moment. I'm having conversations in Toronto. I know that we're not going to go to a country or a city for one client, but we'll go there and begin that journey with one client. And hopefully that client turns into 10 clients and 15. And then we're working in retail and FMCG and pharma or whatever we choose is the right avenue for us to go down.
I love it. And it sounds simple, but I think in today's world, we often forget the simple of do a great job. And like you're saying, the type of clients you work with, they're global organizations, that pull will always be easier than trying to knock on doors and push. And I think, for anyone listening, it sounds very sensible. I guess to your point of then, and just that builds on, you've been pulled by a one client, and maybe this is for the US, how have you filled your diary with those other 20 meetings? What is that, from the land, how have you found expand?
Gosh, there's different ways. What we've really benefited from is a network of really strong board advisors or sort of non-execs. But I think the term non-execs is a bit overused because we're not a listed business. We don't have to have a regulated person on the board. They're board advisors. They're people that are known in the market, that are, we've got the Barbara is the ex-CIO of HSBC. We've got really senior people. And the most important thing is they've got to buy into what you're creating, because ultimately they have a stock in a local market, whether it be formed from their years of tenure in a firm, or whether it be from their golf and their tennis club relationships. And so working hand in glove with those people opens up way more avenues, but they're not going to do it on a whim. They're going to want to see that you've come in, you've done something, you've made an impact. So that's one avenue. We're really good at sort of like when we're in a market, at sort of growing our sort of tentacles in that market. And you can do that through the most obvious things, attending breakfast events and all that kind of good stuff. But really it's about saying, look, solution selling is so key. What have we actually sold here? So there's a firm in Ireland, I won't say who it is, but we came in to replace a very well-known big consultancy firm. So we replaced them. I saw their rate card. It was obscene. I don't think ours is obscene. I think it's fair. We replaced them. We were due to come in and just sort of top and tail with them. Very quickly, we replaced them in its entirety. We're now sort of one of one in that firm in terms of any new work. And we're talking to them at the moment about a large project. They were the ones who were saying, this really works, doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you sort of verified it. They're the ones that are sort of like becoming a spokesperson in the local market. But also, when you start to go out and have those conversations, they're very much my trip to New York, it's very much, this is what we've done. This is demonstrable evidence. We're not full of it. This is demonstrable evidence of what we've fixed. This is how we fixed it. Is there anything in your world that could benefit from that as a solution? And it might be they turn around and say, no, I'm all right, thanks. I prefer dealing with, the big four, because ultimately you don't get fired for using Accenture, whatever the term is, or IBM, whatever the term is. Yeah, I agree with that. And it's probably the most frustrating thing we come across. You don't get promoted either, but it's a pretty safe bet. But quite often people turn around and say, actually, yeah. And they'll kick the tires. They'll reference you. They want to see that it's not a punt. They want to see that you're good to your word, and you might try it with a proof of concept. And that proof of concept can quite easily spin up into something much greater. And you're the sort of chef, and you get all your ingredients and you stick them on your bowl and you stick it in the oven, and out comes, hopefully, touch wood, a very nice looking cake. I mean, you can delete that if you want, but I just think we're really good at looking at angles and looking at, the whole internalization thing was born out of somebody saying to me, I'm just pig sick of spending so much time with people and then off they go across the street. And so we looked at it, we modeled it commercially, it looked like it worked. And now it's something that we're famous for. People were getting annoyed about the junior model because hiring 30 kids to turn up on Monday morning doesn't necessarily get you on the 6:02 back home. It might get you on the 9:02 because now you've got more people. So, the pyramid structure, having a client say, I'm sick of $5,000 suits. The guy's in Geneva and New York now. I don't even know where that guy is that I bought this solution from. So again, the pyramid model, having that, that top of the pyramid that can go to your excos, that can go to your town halls, and letting them sort of be the swan and handle everything below the water is, it's just, I mean, honestly, it's not, I'd love to claim that, it came to me in a sort of Buddhist temple, on my sort of Thailand trip. It's really just listen, and it's not hard, and just be authentic and just be real, and don't try and bullshit people, and let your success do the talking for you.
Well, it's to our conversation just before this. Maybe that needs to be the personal brand, JC, the Thailand Buddha trip. But like I said, not authentic, which is not what we want. And I guess it comes back to your point of that kind of, there's a simplicity in that, but that listening and talking, it's one of those themes that's come through today, be it your team, be it your clients. And I guess sounds so simple, but often we forget is, everyone here's the Steve Jobs iPhone. If you asked everyone what they want, it wouldn't have been an iPhone. But I think what we do is quite different to that. And actually, like you say, understanding what the market wants and then giving it to them. And if you can do that in a way that's successful, profitable, everyone wins.
Yeah, we're a solutions business. Our solution, Albany Beck solution, is getting things done through people. And so it'd be sort of remiss of us to ignore talking to people. We haven't developed, a wonderful tool to fix everyone's problems that we can sell as a sort of SaaS product and just sit there and ring the till on, sort of monthly subscription costs, charges. It's a people business. People is the main ingredient to our success. So as we're a people business, be personable, talk to people. And I'm obviously giving you the highlight reel of like, there are some meetings where we aren't perfect. Sometimes they tell us that we're not perfect, and it's how we react to that. We either carry on as a P&O cruise liner and just, have a turning circle that takes like a day and a half, or we fix it. We hire people that need to help with that. We tinker. We constantly, look at what the smoke signal is telling us and do something about it.
I love it. Well, and I think, JC, a fairly good place for us to draw to a close, because I'm mindful you've got an afternoon of board meetings. I did promise you at least some semblance of a lunch break. And actually this section, as you'll remember, there are questions I ask every guest, but on round 2 episodes, those questions, we've already heard your answers around the advice you'd give to consultants and the books that had the biggest impact. I tweak, though, the book one because I like to ask it, and it doesn't have to be books. This is the thing I've learned, to your point, listening to guests. Not every guest loves books.
No, I'm definitely one of them.
And I guess my question would be, you mentioned servant leadership. We've talked about a few other things. Since our last podcast, is there a YouTube, a podcast, a speaker? I'll add books in case, books that's had a big impact for you. Is there something that you would say, this has really stuck with me and my listeners should go and listen to, watch, see?
Oh, God, I'm going to sound really cocky here. No, I don't really do the self-help book things. It's going to make you chuckle. I recently got diagnosed with ADHD. Not that should make you chuckle.
Is that?
Yeah. Bum, bum. It might drop.
Not sure allowed to make jokes about that in this day and age.
Well, I think as I
have... you are allowed to, yes.
I am.
I am not.
No, you're not. And the fact you laughed actually is disgusting.
This might be the last episode of the show, JC. We'll get cancelled.
There's no chapter 3. My son actually just got diagnosed, and when the report came back, I read it and I thought, literally, it's describing me. And so, interesting thing about getting diagnosed with ADHD: every person you tell that you've just been diagnosed with ADHD, they also tell you, "I think I have ADHD." Interesting fact: I reckon I'm 100% score on that. That's every single person goes, "Yes, I have it as well." It's as cheesy as it is, it's an amazing superpower. It legitimately is. And a lot of the things we do, and I've done a lot of reading up on it for my son more than for me. You take more risks. You think 5 steps ahead. And I love that about me. You constantly toil all the time with, are you good enough? Is this good enough? Are you good enough for your family? All that stuff. It's a constant battle, but you wouldn't swap it. You absolutely wouldn't swap it. And so I tell my 9-year-old, this is amazing. You're really fortunate. But actually, understanding that little bit about me has enabled me to concentrate a little bit more on myself. And concentrating a little bit more on myself, I feel that I've improved. I only got diagnosed 3 months ago, but I've started to. Now, I have not got the capacity to sit and read like the chimp paradox, or I just don't know when I would fit that, if I'm being completely honest. And I'm in the minority, because you listen to any interview with world leaders and they digest, they consume these books, and I'm sort of jealous. I mean, there's quite clever apps out there that basically.
I was going to say, have I told
Headway?
I was going to say Audible, which is the longer version. Headway is one of those. Is that one of the ones that condenses them?
It's condensed. I don't know how good it is, but there's things like Atomic Habits, which I think the takeaway of that is change something small, 1%. It's that 1% thing. I think they use a really good analogy where they talk about. I've forgotten his name now. He's at Man U, but he used to be the Sky. Cycling guy.
Brailsford?
Yes,
Brailsford?
That's the one.
Yeah.
He's got like a normal, like Dave or something.
Yes, yeah.
Or like Brian or something, isn't it? Yeah. His name's Sir, like Dave. But yeah, I think they did this thing where they like got, had UV lights to get rid of the dust on bikes. I'm not sure, how important. But I think, changing 1%, I'm trying to lose weight at the moment, just changing 1% of what you do actually has.
It's gone very well. You look like it's more than 1%.
Yeah, well, that 1% was like a chocolate cake every day. So, that 1% was, 8,000 calories. But, I'm not really answering your question. I don't really do those books, if I'm being honest. I think that I'm quite empathetic. And I think I'm also quite paranoid about stuff. So I think you put all that in the mix, and I'm constantly listening, constantly looking, constantly analyzing, constantly working out how I can be better as a leader, constantly working out how my business can be better as a company. And so that sort of internal voice, that internal struggle means that, I'm sort of always analyzing my own business, analyzing my own self as well. As I've said before, not always perfect or always get it right. But I'm not sure that's really answered your question. But
well, it wasn't the answer I expected, JC. But I loved it in that, I know you'd briefly mentioned the ADHD diagnosis just before we started, and obviously I wanted
you laughed then as well.
We'll cut that bit out. But I also love, and also well done to you. I think it's worth recognizing the frame. I think in today's world where we talk a lot about mental health, but so often it is actually mental unhealth, or people frame it as mental unhealth. I actually love how you are embracing that and instilling in your son the superpower and nature of it, because to your point, actually, those are skills that have got you to where you are today. And you've learned more about it. At the same time, having that frame guides life. There are people who might have had the same diagnosis who say, well, I could never start a business because of this. Whereas, your frame of, well, this is the thing that's enabled this. I just think it's a great way to look at it.
I mean, when I got the report, when I went to meet the chap who did the diagnosis, he says you very much talked in your questions about how you find it, a bit of a nightmare that on a Saturday morning, you're watching your kids playing rugby or football or whatever it might be, and you're not really present. You're thinking about what's going on. Have you done this? Have you done that in a work capacity? And he's like, you very much came. I sort of went for the diagnosis because I thought, can it improve being more present in non-work related stuff? And I think it has. But he said that what's phenomenal is that your personality is not just found a job where it's all about problems. You've actually created a company where it's all about fixing problems. And he's like, your worst nightmare is going to work 9 to 5, plugging into your terminal, sort of BAU, unplugging, going home. He's like, that's your worst nightmare. The dopamine levels in your brain are constantly looking for all these problems. And it doesn't feel like that, quite a lot of time. But he said it's just amazing. And so the root of what you have done and chosen to sort of be in your professional career is a firm that puts fires out. And if you didn't have that, you'd sort of lose the purpose to anything. And I was like, well, it's great. Probably not great for the heart, blood pressure, but it's great for sort of like my own brain. And actually then you start to embrace it and go, yeah, actually, that's so true. No offense to people that do that. It's not for me. I love the risks. I love that excitement. I'm excited about New York next week. I'm meeting brand new people. I get to talk about my favorite subject, which is my business and me a little bit. And, it's brilliant. It's great. It's really exciting. Will loads of stuff come of it? Maybe it won't. But right now, I've got the ball and I'm looking up and I might shoot. So it's great. I love it. It's my favorite part.
Oh, well, JC, I think that is a fantastic way to end today. Thank you for round two. For anyone who does want to get in touch, for any of those investors whose interest you've piqued, any recruits, anyone who wants to work with you, where would you point them to? Where can they find you?
Oh, God, LinkedIn, I suppose. It's the sort of mecca of all things.
It certainly is. Well, I will put your LinkedIn in the show notes, put the Albany Beck website. And yes, thank you for this, JC. It's been a great round two. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Nick. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by Create Engage, the specialist digital marketing agency for the disruptive management consultancy. Now, for long-time listeners, you will probably already know who we are. You may have even heard one of our ads on a previous episode of this podcast. But for those of you who don't, here is a short introduction. At Create Engage, we help you create an effective marketing strategy for your consultancy, a strategy that will resonate with your target clients. And then we support you by delivering the campaigns you need to turn that strategy into a reality, helping you to build your brand, raise your profile with your prospective clients, and ultimately generate return on investment from your marketing activity. Now, I could tell you about many of the great clients that we work with and the results we've delivered for them. But instead, I'm going to do something much more powerful and something that I would recommend you do for your own marketing. I'm going to let our clients do the talking for us. If you are currently thinking about marketing for your consultancy, you're going to want to listen to this.
Create Engage started the process for us. They managed it end to end. They came up with some really creative ideas and we were really happy with the work that they did, which meant that we could just focus on running the business. Not only did we start conversations with clients that we hadn't spoken to before, but also there was tangible return on investment by some work that we were given.
They've helped right from the initial shaping of the idea through to helping us work out what our end goal was. They've supported us with the visual identity and our positioning of the brand.
We've had an immediate expansion of our network and have initiated a raft of new conversations with owners, CEOs in target client organisations, and has led to us winning new projects already.
One of the greatest compliments, I guess, is that one of our competitors even said that they really like what we're doing with marketing and they wish they could be doing something as good.
So from our perspective, we couldn't recommend Create Engage any more than this.
I would certainly recommend Create Engage if you're a consulting firm. They really understand consultancies and the sort of challenges we face. And I don't think you're going to get much better marketing anywhere else.
So I wouldn't hesitate to recommend Create Engage. They did a really good job for us.
So if you're looking for an agency that can help you achieve the results that our clients just described, then head to our website, createengage.co.uk, where you can find out more about how we support consulting firms like you. You can download our latest ebook and you can get in touch to talk about how we can help you take your consultancy to the next level through digital marketing. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Climbing Consulting. If you have any guest recommendations, comments, ideas, thoughts on how I can make this show better for you, just drop me an email. It's nick@createengage.co.uk, and I really look forward to hearing from you.